Forget what you saw in movies, real torture devices were way worse. We are talking skin peeled off, bones smashed, bodies ripped open and left for the crowd to cheer. This is human history, unfiltered and bloody. Listen closely because the stuff at the bottom of this list is so brutal, it is almost hard to believe people invented it on purpose. Let us start with number 1. A simple wooden frame and a set of ropes turned into England's most feared torture machine. The rack did its job by pulling wrists and ankles in opposite directions, stretching the body far beyond its limits. Every turn of the handle created pain most people can barely imagine. Yet, the real story lies in the faces of those who survived. Take Anne Askew arrested for her Protestant beliefs in 1545, officials in the Tower of London tied her to the Duke of Exeter's daughter, as the rack was called. She later described being stretched until her joints dislocated, leaving her unable to walk to her execution. Yet, she never gave up a name. How did people endure this? Was the threat worse than the pain? The rack's main purpose was not to kill, but to break resistance. It turned confessions into court evidence and the scars into warnings. Bones did not always snap, but the joints and nerves often paid the price for life. Even when it failed, interrogators always had something new waiting, sometimes the total opposite of stretching. And if a person survived the rack, the next device was ready, one that crushed the body instead of pulling it apart. The next is number 2, Scavenger's Daughter. In Tudor, England, inventors of pain took things in a different direction. The Scavenger's Daughter was an iron frame shaped like an A designed to fold the prisoner in half, head down, knees up, body squeezed tight. This strange device was built to do the exact opposite of the rack. Imagine sitting in a metal vise. Pressure crushed the body until veins bulged and breathing grew tight, blood rushed to the head, noses bled, and the pain of being squeezed matched the agony of being stretched. Interrogators switched between both methods to show prisoners that worse pain was always possible. The Scavenger's Daughter, named after Sir Leonard Skeffington of the Tower of London, made prisoners faint or even go blind from its pressure. Tudor torturers used it for heresy and high treason, the cases meant to send kingdom-wide warnings. The threat alone made many confess, but public spectacle demanded something far more dramatic. That is where the breaking wheel entered. The breaking wheel was a brutal display of justice, a giant cartwheel heavy enough to shatter bones. Victims were tied down while executioners smashed limbs in a specific court-ordered sequence. In 1589, Peter Stump, known as the Werewolf of Bedburg, was tortured with hot pincers, broken on the wheel, then beheaded and burned. Sometimes bodies were woven into wheel spokes and lifted high for all to see, turning punishment into theater. But some rulers wanted fear mixed with horror. They built a machine of metal and sound, the Brazen Bull. A hollow bronze statue with a door, it trapped victims inside as fire heated the metal. Special pipes transformed screams into the roar of an enraged bull. Legend claims its inventor Paralaus was the first test victim. Whether myth or truth, the bull became a symbol of hidden suffering broadcast to the entire crowd. Yet terror also came in simple forms. The Judas cradle used a wooden frame with a pyramid seat. Prisoners were suspended by ropes and lowered slowly, fear arriving before pain. Small movements changed everything, and the device relied on time, gravity, and exhaustion. Finally came the Spanish donkey, a triangular beam used by armies and courts. Offenders sat on the sharp edge for hours, sometimes with weights tied to their legs. Its strength came from humiliation and endurance, leaving victims unable to walk normally for days. And inside dim rooms, even worse devices waited, ones that looked like furniture until you noticed the spikes. Number 7 was the torture chair, found across Europe in wood and iron forms. Its surface was covered with hundreds of spikes on the seat, back, arms, and legs. Once a prisoner sat, guards strapped them so tightly that even slight movement was impossible. Some versions had gags or head restraints, others used trays of hot coals beneath the seat to heat the metal slowly. The chair symbolized silence and control inside interrogation rooms. Records from Inquisition-era Spain mention these restraint chairs, and although many surviving models are later reconstructions, their design matches early descriptions of tools built to intimidate and question. Next came the Spanish boot, designed to crush the lower legs, Some versions used wooden boards tightened with hammered wedges, others used iron casings with screws. Each strike increased pressure with precision. Scottish records describe prisoners questioned in the boots, including a teenage boy tortured as officials watched his mother. Survivors often walked with difficulty for months. Because it tightened in stages, interrogators treated the boot as both warning and punishment. Then came the thumb screws, a small metal clamp tightened by hand. Guards carried them, easily placing them on tables to break resistance. Scotland used them in witchcraft cases, and accounts from slave ships describe them forcing obedience. Their speed and simplicity made them unforgettable. Number 10 was the garrote, a metal collar tightened by a screw. Spain used it for centuries, even into the 1970s, both for executions and mock torture. Its threat alone silenced many. Finally came the scold's bridle, a metal head cage with a tongue plate used in Scotland and northern England. Women accused of gossip were paraded through streets, the device turning shame into punishment. The scold's bridle controlled speech, directly forcing silence on anyone who argued or insulted officials. After punishments aimed at talk, towns turned to water-based spectacle. The ducking stool used a long beam with a chair fixed at one end, lowering offenders, usually women accused of scolding or dishonest trade, into rivers or ponds. Townsmen dunked them at the crowd's pace. Records show ducking used in England and its colonies into the early 1800s, with surviving stools in Warwick and Canterbury. Some punishments became slow humiliation when water levels ran low, and sometimes ducking echoed early witch tests. Each plunge reminded the crowd who held authority. Next came the pillory and stocks, fixtures of town squares. The pillory trapped the head and hands while the stocks held the feet. These punishments relied on exposure. Crowds mocked through objects or simply watched. Courts used pillories for fraud, perjury, and market offenses. When Daniel Defoe faced the pillory in 1703, supporters covered the ground with flowers, but most offenders endured ridicule. Stocks punished drunkenness, debt, and minor disorder. Delaware carried out the last American pillory sentence in 1901. These devices punished reputation as much as the body. In China, the Kong turned shame into a burden. A thick wooden board locked around the neck, sometimes weighing 30 pounds, offenders walked, slept, and ate with their crime written on the wood. Ming Dynasty records described its construction, and late photographs show real people trapped in these boards, sometimes suspended so their feet barely touched the ground. Then came the heretic's fork, a double-pronged metal tool fixed between chest and jaw, preventing sleep. Its pain came from exhaustion, forcing wakefulness during interrogations, though debated illustrations show its intended use. The pear of anguish, a pear-shaped expanding device, appears widely in museums, but evidence of real medieval use is weak. Many surviving examples may be later creations or symbolic tools of fear. The pear of anguish became famous because it symbolized hidden pain, even if its real history was uncertain. When myth and fact blurred, the next device emerged straight from imagination, yet became the most iconic torture symbol: the Iron Maiden. The tall, human-shaped cabinet lined with spikes appeared in museums as a medieval tool, but research shows the first real Iron Maiden was built in early 1800s Nuremberg from older parts to attract visitors. There is no evidence it killed anyone, yet newspapers and guidebooks spread its legend. It became famous because it embodied fear behind a closed metal door, a story stronger than historical truth. The Spanish tickler followed with real brutality. A handheld set of curved iron claws, it tore skin on the back, arms, or legs, sometimes heated beforehand to add burns. Court records show it used in interrogations, witch hunts, and blasphemy cases, often leaving permanent scars. Its simplicity made it terrifying: no machinery, just iron and human force. Next came the breast ripper, one of the most gendered torture tools. A jagged metal clamp shaped for a woman's breast, sometimes heated red hot, it caused permanent mutilation. Records from German regions mention its use against women accused of adultery, heresy, or witchcraft. The device aimed at shame as much as pain, often used before executions. Then came the tongue tearer, a clamp with spikes meant to tear or rip out the tongue. Law codes prescribed tongue removal for blasphemy and slander, and cities kept these tools visible as warnings. Fear alone often broke prisoners, though some real mutilations were recorded. Finally came the rat cage torture, using a single desperate rat trapped against the body. Heat drove the rat inward, clawing into flesh. Reports across Europe, Russia, and later regimes describe its use to terrify or extract confessions. The rat cage's terror spread far beyond its historical uses. George Orwell's 1984 showed how deeply the fear lived in the mind, needing no machinery beyond a cage, a rat, and the imagination of those in power. Survivors often carried psychological scars longer than physical wounds. From animal terror, torture moved to water itself. The waterboarding board used a bench, straps, a cloth, and water. The prisoner lay tied down while water poured over the covered face, triggering instant drowning panic. Though centuries-old waterboarding gained global attention after 2001 when the CIA used it in secret sites, survivors described hallucinations and trauma, and international groups now classify it as torture despite earlier claims of enhanced interrogation. Next came the tiger bench, still reported in modern China. A narrow plank became agony as legs stretched out, ankles raised, and the body strapped tightly. Hours caused swelling, numbness, and nerve damage. Human rights groups document prisoners left on the bench for entire days, forced into confessions without leaving obvious scars. Its horror lay in stillness and time. The tiger chair followed, steel, rigid, and impossible to escape. Prisoners sat locked at wrists, ankles, waist, and chest, sometimes for days. Reports from political dissidents and lawyers described long-term nerve injury and loss of sensation. Guards needed only to strap someone in and walk away. Pain came from immobility, not blows. The final device was the modern restraint chair used in high-security prisons and detention centers. It looked medical but enabled force feeding and prolonged restraint. Hunger strikers had tubes forced down their throats as liquid food was poured in. Some prisoners suffered bleeding injuries and lasting damage. Officials called it care, survivors called it torture. These modern tools show how cruelty evolves, surviving even into the present.